Hello, and welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. Today, we will be going through chapters 3 through 6 of The Way of Kings. Paul and Eliot, can you give me 2 words to describe this passage?
Okay, my 2 words, right off the top of my head, are hopeful and cheesy.
Hopeful and cheesy. Eliot?
Yes.
Mine's a little darker. I'm going with death denied.
Death
That is
denied, hopeful and cheesy. All right, let's expound upon these, shall we? All right. To start things off, let us do a spell check.
my specialty.
Eliot,
Oh boy.
how would you pronounce the City of Bells?
City of Bells. Why do I always have to go first? I guess Paul has the harder job,
It-
really.
Because if
doing
Paul
the
goes,
spelling
then
bees.
he ruins the spelling or the pronunciation for you.
Exactly. Okay. The City of Bells, as I read it for the first time here in chapter 3, I definitely set it in my head as Carbranth.
Okay. Paul, how would you say it, or how does the audiobook say it, and how would you spell it?
So it is said as Carbranth, and I would spell it as Kharbranth. Going with car, kind of like colon, the KH. That's where I'm going with the KH at the
It's a
beginning.
good guess.
Okay.
Intelligent guess.
So it is spelled. Hold on, Elliot. You want to tell him? I don't have it pulled up on for myself.
I'm flipping to it right now. Okay, I'll
We'll
read it
just say that
out of
it's
the book,
right. We'll just say it's correct.
which I think it's exactly what you said. I think you nailed it. Kharbranth.
Let's
Carbranth.
go. That was it. I even have it written down if you wanna see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you nailed it.
Look at me go. All right.
All right,
Give me the next.
Elliot. The second one is the name of the heretic princess.
Okay, this one I feel like should be easy, but
Mhm.
the fact that you picked it makes me now think it's a trick question.
Okay.
But I'm gonna stick with my first impression and go with Jasna.
Okay.
Straightforward Jasna.
All right. Paul, how do they say it in the audiobook?
Yasna. Like a Y sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought about that. I thought about going that way, but I was like,
Mhm. With
went with the obvious.
in the audiobook, there's like 2 or so times where you can hear the J. They sounds like Jasna. So I said Jasnah for how to spell her name.
That is correct.
Nice.
Bingo, 2 for 2. Look at
A lot
you.
better than last episode. That's for sure.
Okay. Yep, it's Yasna. There's also a country or a nation that they've mentioned once so far. It's called Yaakaved. It's also spelled with a J. So both J's are with a
Okay.
Y. So it's Yaakaved and Yasna.
I'll be honest. I like that better than what I was pronouncing it with my head with the hard
Mhm.
J. I like the softer yes sound better.
Yep.
So I like that.
Okay. And the last one, Elliot, is Shalon's nation heritage. It is. I can tell you where to find it. She's from. Well, that would ruin it.
Just go ahead. He won't mind.
I think I know.
Yeah,
the word
okay, go for it.
You're referring to. I'm pretty sure. So, the way I'm reading that word is Vedin.
Okay.
I almost want to say. more of an A sound, but when I first read it, I went for Vedin.
Okay. Paul, how do they say it?
In the audiobook, they always say Vaden, as best as I remember. Vaden. So my guess as to spell it was Veydan.
Okay. It is Veden, which is why Eliot went for Veden,
Okay.
but it's pronounced Vaden,
Okay.
Aiden. Okay.
and she's
Wow.
from Vadenar. So, yep.
Got it.
All right. Well, let's expound upon our two words.
I was about to. I could talk
Yep.
about my
Paul,
words.
let's go for you.
They're very,
Cheesy.
they're very different.
What was your second word? Well,
Hopeful.
hopeful.
Was my first one. Yes. So I chose hopeful. One, because in the Shalon chapters, it's she's at this new place, and I feel like there's just kind of hope in the air. It seems like a bright day, kind of description, and it just had that hopeful feel.
Mhm.
I also said it in part because of the Caledon chapters, in that it is very gloomy and dark, but I don't know. I guess I had a lot of hope that he would escape or something good will happen and he'll get out of his rough situation. And cheesy, we'll get into this a lot more later on, but I personally think that a lot of the Shalon chapters are kind of cheesy and a lot of her dialogue is cheesy, and I'm not the biggest fan, but we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Okay. Cheesy. Why cheesy? I'm confused on why you'd say that.
So, in these chapters, I feel like everything that Shalon says when talking with the sailors or whoever is always trying to outsmart them and say something really not necessarily profound, but everything is I'm trying to outwit you at the moment.
Sure.
And I thought it was really cheesy. It wasn't. I didn't feel like she was. I mean, she did seem very intelligent, very smart woman, but I thought it was a little much, more than a little.
So
much.
do you think it's poorly written, or do you like the character's poorly written, or do you think the character is cheesy and supposed to be cheesy?
I think they should have pulled back a lot on the amount, unless that's the goal they're going for. And I don't imagine that is.
Okay.
I don't think she was intended to be a cheesy character. But
And hopeful. Why hopeful?
hopeful because she's coming here and she wants to kind of progress her life and hopefully become a ward, and so there's that new hope of going to a new place and having a good life and kind of progressing and stuff. Also in part for the Caledon chapters, at least hopeful in my mind that he'll escape or something will come of his dire situation.
Okay. I understand that you would be hopeful for Caledon in these chapters, but Caledon himself is not very hopeful of these chapters.
He's not very hopeful, that is true.
All right, Elliot, let's go to your two words. What were they?
So I said death denied,
Okay.
and I read all the same stuff as Paul did, and I got some of those vibes, but I walked away with a much more negative takeaway from these chapters. I think that Caledon goes to a very dark place by the end of these setup chapters. Like it is we thought we were at a low before, and now we're at a new low that's even lower, and to the point where he's about ready to he's ready to die almost, but he doesn't. He's in this place that's almost worse than death, which we'll talk about in a second. But then in the Shalon chapters, there's a bit of death involved because of her father, and we don't learn much about that. All we know is that he's dead, and we don't know why. So I was denied the info of learning why her father is dead, but then also Shalon herself gets denied by Yasna.
Yes,
Did I say that
Yasna.
right?
Yep.
Yasna?
Yasna?
Denied by Yasna, so lots of denial and death. Or, yeah, denial of death.
Okay. So it's interesting to me that that one of you has death as one of their words, and the other one has hopeful as one of their words.
Yeah.
I want to
Bit of a spectrum.
I want to highlight the difference between chapter 2, which we read last week, and chapter 3. So the opening of chapter 2, I'm going to read a quote here. This is the very first part of chapter 2. Caledon's stomach growled as he reached towards the bars and accepted the bowl of slop. He pulled the small bowl, more of a cup, between the bars, sniffed it, then grimaced as the caged wagon began to roll again. The sludgy gray slop was made from overcooked tallow grain, and this batch was flecked with crusted bits of yesterday's meal. Revolting though it was all he would get. So his head is down this entire chapter. Everything describing this chapter is very in Caledon's head, and he's very self-focused. You don't get very much of his surroundings as an explanation. Now, I want to read the opening to chapter 3. This is about the third paragraph in. Carbranth was enormous. Built up the side of a steep incline, the city was wedge-shaped, as if it were built into a wide crack, with the open side toward the ocean. The buildings were blocky, with square windows, and appeared to have been constructed of some kind of mud or daub. Creme, perhaps? They were painted bright colors, red and orange, most often, but occasionally blues and yellows too. She could hear the bells already, tinkling in the wind, ringing with pure voices. She had to strain her neck to look up toward the city's loftiest rim. Carbranth was like a mountain towering over her. How many people lived in a place like this? Thousands? Tens of thousands? She shivered again, daunted yet excited, then blinked pointedly, fixing the image of the city in her memory. Shallan's head is up. She is looking around. She is perky. She is excited to be there. Her breath is taken back. And Caledon,
You might could say hopeful.
right? And Caledon is very not in the same headspace that Shallan is. So it is very interesting that both of you came up with those two words. Paul, why? What's your thought on the Shallan chapters? You said you weren't the biggest fan of them. Why is that, besides cheesy?
So I think the Shallan chapters included a lot of unnecessary detail. Detail is very good, especially in books, right?
Okay.
You get a bigger picture of the world. You learn about what the people are like, how they act. But a lot of the dialogue with her, I felt like it was unnecessary. She kind of tries to outwit the pirates she's traveling with. I thought it was unnecessary, and to be honest, a lot of the chapters were kind of boring. It's fair to say, it's not supposed to be an action-packed chapter. That's totally fine. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't very entertaining for me to read at all. I didn't really enjoy it.
All right.
The Shallan chapters are definitely like background, at least for now. They're kind of like they're filling in a lot of information. Like they're answering some of the questions that I've had from previous chapters, but yeah, not a whole lot happens in the Shallan chapters.
Yeah. So these Shallan chapters, especially early on, are your history and culture lesson. They introduce a lot of culture, vocabulary, and a lot of history and like nationalities interacting, that type of thing. So while I understand that you want to get back to Caledon is probably where a lot of your frustration is, because Brandon Sanderson's hooked you with Caledon, and you want to, I don't know, skip the Shallan chapter and get back to Caledon, which I totally understand. You need to start immersing yourself in Roshar, which is what Shallan's trying to do. She's trying to learn. She's trying to get her wardship and educate herself, and by by correlation educating the reader. So that's why these are slower, more observant than the Caledon chapters.
True. I do have a lot of faith or hope that these chapters will come into play a lot. The characters we meet will have a bigger part to come. But yeah, my biggest complaint was, maybe they're slightly too long and they could have still done the same job.
Okay. Let's talk about a little bit of the vocabulary we get from chapter 3. We have everybody calls her brightness, Shalon. We have the heralds are mentioned. We have Vorinism and the Vorin religion mentioned. And we have spheres as a currency mentioned. Do any of you have questions on these?
Yeah, I was fascinated in chapter 3 by what we learned about the religion. Is Vorin the name of the religion?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought it was. And all the references to, Vorin tradition and whatnot, I assumed that's where it was going for. And we learned, we've got references to the heralds. We get lots of references to the Almighty.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of characters, especially in the Caledon chapters, refer to the Stormfather.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same entity that they're referring to? Do we know that?
Great question. You don't know that yet. And
okay,
so
that's why we're asking.
It depends on, at this point in the chapter, it would depend on the culture you talk to. So some cultures would spin Vorinism to say that the Almighty is a spren. He is Roshar. He isn't really a being. He's kind of just nature, like Father Nature. He sends the storms. He's the Storm Father. But then if you talk to another culture or subdivision of Vorinism, they would be, no, those are two different people. The Almighty created Roshar. The Storm Father is like a spren of the wind and sends the storms. And so it depends on, nobody knows really. It depends on who you talk to.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the other bit we get in chapter 3 that had me confused at first, but then I think I caught on, was the whole difference between the free hand and the safe hand, and how Shalon is always using her free hand to do stuff while her safe hand is tucked inside her dress, and she always notices like the women that she encounters, whether their safe hand is covered or not, or things like that. Is that tied into the religion? Is that like a religious belief that they follow?
Yep.
Or is that more just like a culture, society, norm, tradition?
So that is a Vorin tradition that the woman's safe hand, I believe it's the right hand. I'm second guessing myself now though.
I don't remember.
Maybe I actually don't. I think it's the right hand, but I could be mistaken. That it's always covered, and it's just a modesty thing. And so if you see the woman's safe hand, then that's promiscuous.
Taboo.
Right. So women always keep their safe hand covered and do everything with their free hand. But then some cultures would be like, no, that's silly. We follow everything with the Vorin culture, but we're just going to wear a glove. Or we follow everything, but we don't care about safe hands. We're just going to use both our hands and deal with it, that type of thing. Yeah, that's just a superstition that they have, I guess you could say, or a tradition.
I'm very curious to learn about spheres.
Okay.
So it talks about these infused gemstones. I think it's really cool. I actually really enjoyed that description of the currency and how they all have different gemstones in them. I think it's really cool imagery.
So this isn't really a spoiler, but I don't know if they explain it like explicitly in this chapter. Every gemstone is used to soul cast, and each gemstone can soul cast a different thing. So I believe Yasna uses a black gemstone to soul cast a boulder into smoke, and by definition that black gemstone has a certain value. That's reflected in their currency. So in their currency, they're going to have small, tiny rubies or emeralds or diamonds in these spheres, and the value is based on what they can soul cast with them. So some gemstones can soul cast food, or some gemstones can soul cast stone and that type of thing, and that determines their worth.
I see. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed too that there was a difference between infused spheres and non-infused spheres. Like there were dull spheres, which you could still use as currency, as money, it sounded like, but the infused ones are worth more. Was that the case?
So on paper, no, they're worth the same, because you can still, so you leave your spheres out in the high storm to infuse them, and they glow with stormlight if you've left them outside in a high storm. So you can always infuse spheres. Gives it authenticity that it actually is an emerald, and it's easier to forge if it's done.
That's right, because they made a reference that only real gemstones can hold stormlight.
Correct.
So if it was a counterfeit gem, you wouldn't be able to infuse it. That makes more sense.
They're
now.
more they're more suspicious of dun spheres if you're trying to buy something with dun spheres, because it could be counterfeit.
Got it.
So what all did it say about the 10 heralds? To be honest, I don't remember the mentions in the chapters. Maybe I went too fast, but I know it references the heralds in general fairly often, but I don't remember any specific things. I was curious what y'all noticed.
So when Shallan hears that Yasna is still in the city, down at the docks, she says a little prayer of thank the heralds. And it's kind of pushing the envelope of the heralds are almighty, deific beings. They aren't the almighty, but they're sent by the almighty to save mankind. And as we know in the prelude, they didn't hold up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, it seemed like just a bunch of, so far, kind of loose references to the heralds, like just heralds be praised, or thank the heralds, and things like that, just getting thrown out at different random times.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, some cultures consider the Stormfather and the Almighty to be the same person. And speaking of the Stormfather and high storms, I want to read an excerpt from chapter 4, describing the high storm that hits Caledon's wagon. It says, "Occasionally light would flash without the thunder. The slaves would groan in terror at this, thinking about the Stormfather, the shades of the Lost Radiance, or the Voidbringers, all of which were said to haunt the most violent high storms. They huddled together on the far side of the wagon, sharing warmth. Caledon left them to it, sitting alone, with his back to the bars. Caledon didn't fear stories of things that walked the storms. In the army, he'd been forced to weather a high storm or two beneath the lip of a protective stone overhang, or over bit of an impromptu shelter. Nobody liked to be out during a storm, but sometimes you couldn't avoid it. The things that walked the storms, perhaps even the Stormfather himself, weren't nearly so deadly as the rocks and branches cast up into the air. In fact, the storm's initial tempest of water and wind, the storm wall, was the most dangerous part. The longer one endured after that, the weaker the storm grew, until the trailing edge was nothing more than a sprinkling rain." So he mentions the superstitions of the Voidbringers, the Lost Radiance, the Stormfather that haunt the storms. So a lot of these supernatural beings and like demons and angels, they've kind of all blurred lines over the years. They don't know whether to be afraid of the Lost Radiance or admire the Lost Radiance or the Heralds or the Stormfather. They don't know if they're on their side or not. It's been 4,500 years since the prelude, and they haven't heard anything from any of these. So all of this is faded into myth and like old religion, and they don't really know what's what anymore.
A lot of it came across as superstition, which has me wondering as a first-time reader, are these superstitions that are hinting at real things, or are they actually superstitions and they aren't real? We have the prelude to kind of lead us on in some directions, but I'm struggling to decide what superstitions I think are founded in history and fact, and what superstitions are just superstitions.
Right.
We'll find out, I suppose.
Hopefully so. I like the description a lot about the storms, and I think it's interesting, I guess, just in this world of Roshar, how, I guess, common they are, since the currency is kind of dependent. Like, that's how the gemstones are infused, as far as I understand, and such. So they must be really common, so it sounds like it's a dangerous place to be if they're always, throwing rocks around and stuff.
Yeah. The scenery that is mentioned in chapter 4, you have this on the outline, Elliot, is that it's very raw and under the sea, very washed. Everything feels very underwater all the time, and that's because of these high storms. That all of the plant life, all of the wildlife looks like it should be underwater, but it's not.
Yeah, I picked up on that. All the grass that they describe almost sounds like an anemone, the way it retracts into itself and then comes back out after they pass, or the rock buds that spread vines out and then come back. It just sounds to me like coral formations and things like that. I keep, the more landscape that gets described, the more I just keep thinking ocean and sea, and yeah, the high storms play into all that too. It just feels very underwatery.
Yep.
And then you've got the crustaceans. What are they called? The
Chulls
that are pulling the.
They're like crabs, basically.
Yeah, the wagon that are these. Yeah, the massive crab horse thing, oxen, whatever.
Yep.
And then all the little critters that they reference that are running around. They also sound like crustaceans most of the time when they're describing them. So it seems, I don't know, underwater things kind of creep me out. So it was a little unnerving actually.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard the Chulls mentioned several times, and I honestly never imagined them as a crab-like thing. I don't know what I thought of them, honestly, but hearing that makes them a lot more scary in my mind.
It's
like a horse-sized crab.
The way I viewed it in my mind was a cow, but it has a shell, so it's like a huge turtle almost.
Beautiful.
Yep.
My copy of the book actually has an illustration of them, so I didn't even have to use my imagination.
Nice.
Wow.
That is the benefit of having the ink and paper version.
Very true.
All right. Did any of you pick up on the first mention of Noadon in chapter 5?
Yes,
I did. That was one of the biggest things I realized. That was probably my highlight of the Shalon chapter. I thought it was interesting. There were kind of a lot of names thrown out that we don't know, but we'll probably learn more about as things go on, whenever they're talking about various teachings and, I guess, notable people, notable names, and such. The only one I recognize is Noadon, and I don't think, if I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't have recognized it, so we'll see. But so Noadon is a person in this book, some way, shape, or form, so I've learned that.
And we know for sure that he at least wrote things, because they reference that Shalon has read, I think it was all the works of Noadon. Is that what she said?
She said she'd read, of course, Noadon.
Some of the works,
but
of course she's read
right.
them. Okay, or her or it.
One of the classics. Noadon's a classic author.
I shouted out loud when I read Noadon. I was like, yes, some information. I'm following this person.
It's kind of funny because if this was not our title of the book or of the podcast, you wouldn't have that reaction. He's
noticed.
Literally just one of the scholars that she's supposed to have read, and she has read that one, but she hasn't read the rest of them. So yeah, he has written something that Shalon has read.
So does that mean she's following Noadon with
It's
us?
possible.
Oh yeah.
It's possible.
I'll take that as a yes.
And Yasna has read Noadon as well because she asks about him.
She's read everything apparently.
Yasna Yasna definitely was very demanding. She had very high expectations, and Shallan was definitely caught off guard by that. And I felt a little bad for Shallan. She apparently knows a lot and seemed like she was well equipped, but Yasna did not think so.
And Shallan is definitely an artist, and she presented herself as, and she was waiting for Yasna to ask about her her
Yeah.
art and her feminine her feminine pursuits, and she didn't. And as at the
She
end of
also did not care.
at the end yeah at the end of the chapter, Shallan's like, but what about art? It's a lot of people consider that the best one, and and Yasna's like, I don't see a use for it. Bye. Uh, and that's kind of how it ends. Yasna's very pragmatic. She's brutally honest. She she's not gonna coddle a young award ship if she's not gonna benefit anything from it.
True. Also think it's very interesting. She's called, like we said, the heretic
Mm-hmm.
princess. I think it's interesting because we just started learning about Vorin, that there's like a form of religion and such, and how Yasna is very highly esteemed in this community. You know, from Yasna Kolen, she's I guess in the royal
Mm-hmm.
family, and she is like openly just like doesn't believe it. I think that's just like interesting. It kind of shows that she's non-conforming in a way, and that I feel like a lot of people in when I think of a royal family or anyone high up, they might at least like formally agree in some way, but she really doesn't care. It's she thinks what she thinks, says what she wants to say, and doesn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, she
Yeah, we've only just met her, but I can tell immediately that she's very independent. Like you just said, she's gonna believe what she believes, and she's not gonna care what anyone else thinks.
Yep, she gives no false fronts. She's not gonna say, "Yeah, I believe in Vorinism" to the public and then not actually in private. She's just gonna say what she believes, and if you don't like it, then that's your problem.
So I'm curious to so with Yasna, she does some soul casting, and soul casting isn't something that I fully understand. I understand you use these gemstones, and the gemstones are related to the currency and such. Um, but I'm kind of confused. I'm assuming everyone can't do it, and from what I can tell, Yasna seems particularly good at it. But I didn't know if you had any form of explanation on that about soul casting or more about Yasna's relationship with it.
It's deliberately cryptic in the books. They it's supposed to be like behind closed doors. You don't really talk about it. It's one of the necessary evils of Vorinism. They don't know if it's witchcraft or anything like that, but armies need food, so they're going to turn a blind eye to it and create a bunch of food. You have to have a fabrial to use the gemstone, and if you have the right gemstone, you can turn anything into what that gemstone can create.
I was wondering after reading chapter 5 why smoke, like why she had transformed the boulder that was blocking the doorway into smoke, but I hadn't put together that that was tied to the fact that she was using. I want to say they described it as a smoke
Mm-hmm.
stone or as like
Yep.
a dark, yeah, sphere gemstone. So that makes a lot more sense now. I would think that, I don't know, water or just air would be a little more easy to deal with than coating everything in smoke. But tied to the gemstone makes a lot more sense now why she did
Yep.
that.
Yep. She had to do it to smoke because she had the smoke stone.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be very useful except for, blocking a passage that is caved in.
Yeah.
So before we talk more about the Caledon chapters, I have it's not really a bold prediction, but I have a guess as to how Shalon's character arc is going to go from here on out.
Okay.
So Shalon seems very, she wants this wardship really badly. She wants to help her family. She's a very hard worker, very diligent, and such. And I think, in pursuit either of this wardship or assuming she gets it, I guess in pursuit of knowledge and such, I think there will be some form of a dark turn, and that she doesn't necessarily realize it, but maybe she'll it kind of mess something up in a way in pursuit of knowledge or trying to help others. And I think she's going to end up being some kind of bad figure, but not actually realizing it. But maybe she'll get redeemed later on. Totally out in left field as far as we know,
So
but
do you,
that's my guess.
are you hypothesizing that she'll fail with like on a scholastic side and she won't live up to Yasna's expectations, or is she going to be like malignant and backstab Yasna? What?
I think in some way she's going to backstab someone, and I don't even know if she'll intentionally mean to, but I think she'll in some way get really enthralled with what she's learning about or something, or get really curious about something and may take it too far and end up hurting things, and maybe she won't realize that it's bad. Totally,
Okay.
that's going off of just various other fantasy type character arcs. Total guess,
Okay.
but if that does happen, I do think she'll be redeemed because she seems very kind-hearted.
I can see where you would head that way, because she does definitely have a hunger for learning and a hunger for knowledge, and that is something that can definitely get corrupted for evil purposes without even the person knowing. They're still just going after that history or that knowledge or that learning, but in the midst of that, they can end up doing things they didn't intend to. And Shalon does already have a little bit of an underhanded motive, because we learn at the very end of chapter 5 that she's actually going for this wardship to steal the soulcaster that Yasna has. So we know that that's her motive, but of course Yasna doesn't. So she's already being a little bit sneaky to start with.
Some hidden motives for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's enough to confirm my theory is correct, I'm sure.
Yep. Confirmed.
Check that as a yes, and
We'll tally you a
move
point.
on.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's she has to steal it to save her family, and yeah, Yasna is not aware of this.
So, on an entirely different note, from the pleasant Carbronth, or seemingly present Carbronth, um, Caledon, in the last chapter, he talked about Caledon is now on to a bridge crew, which we're learning more about, and it is definitely not the ideal situation. It seems extremely rough, extremely strenuous,
Hmm.
and he is straight up not having a good time.
I want to I want to highlight something at the beginning of this chapter that is decently important going forward, and that is why he wasn't allowed to be a a slave soldier, and was what he was trying for. It's because of a shash brand on his forehead. So the shash brand on his forehead means dangerous, and you really only get that if you've really messed up. So because he has that shash brand, because he was a deserter, he can no longer be able to fight in the military, whether he's a slave or not. So he's trying to cover up that shash brand and then talk her into letting him in the army. and he isn't allowed to. So he is the lowest of the low because he has this Shash brand on.
I appreciate that description because it mentioned the Shash brand several times. I knew it was really, it was something you didn't want, but I didn't know actually like what it meant.
Yep.
He's definitely getting the short end of the stick again. It's almost like he's the last episode we talked about how he went from lucky, the storm blessed Caledon, to unlucky and everything he does goes poorly. Well, it's getting even more poor as he goes. This is a low place to be, and a brutal introduction to war where he gets stuck on the bridge crew, which a little bit of sad irony. And when he hears he's getting assigned to a bridge crew, he thinks, "Oh, I'm going to be chopping down trees and building bridges. That's not too bad."
Right.
And then as you learn through the second half of the chapter, oh no, this is the brutalest torture that he could have possibly been assigned.
Yep.
I think it's funny that they were optimistic about being slaves. Almost, it seemed that they were optimistic. It's not going to be that bad. Like, this will be fine. This is a good place, and then I guess the bridge crew is the entire tier below that.
Yeah. Him and his slave friends in the wagon were saying, "Oh, we're just going to be working on roads in this hot sun and cleaning out latrines. This won't be as bad as we thought." No, it's 10 times worse than what they thought.
And then on top of that, he gets stuck in a bridge crew with a Sergeant Gaz who takes a not so liking to him and is picking on him and throwing him in even the worst possible situation in an already worst possible situation. It just keeps heaping on top of misery on misery on misery.
Yeah, at the end of chapter 6, it dawns on him that Gaz put him in the front because he was supposed to die. And that does not sit well with him at all, as we'll find out in future chapters.
So, let me explain first. I like the addition of Gaz. He's a very important character. I don't like him at all, but he's one of those characters that's in the book for you to not like.
Right.
But I think a character like that is extremely important. I think it does a lot for the story, and I really like his addition. But yeah, I can't stand Gaz. Horrible, cheaty man.
And just petty. Like, he doesn't even... I think Caledon even talks about this, how he doesn't even need to be nasty. He's just being nasty because he has nothing else to do. It's just petty.
Yeah. And petty's a good word for a lot of characters in this chapter because he tears up Tavlakov's map in chapter 4. In chapter 4. And then Tavlakov backstabs him because he's trying to lie to get in to be a soldier. And then Tavlakov throws him under the bus just because he tore up the map. So yes, there's a lot of pettiness going on here in the slave trade circles.
I'm gonna change that as one of my 2 words. I'll use petty.
That's a good one. I should have thought of that too. So I noticed in amongst all of this, not just chapter 6, but in previous chapters as well, I've noticed that multiple characters use the term, well, 2 terms, storming and blustering, kind of in the place of like curses.
Yep.
Like where you would normally maybe expect a curse word to show up. You'd say, "Oh, that blustering Sergeant Gaz," like that's how they're using those terms in reference to the high storms and how that's just a terrible, thing they have to endure all the time. So I guess it makes total sense that would feed into how they swear.
Yeah. So this is a Brandon Sanderson signature. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up because in all of the series that I've read, they come up with their own swear words in these books. So like in Skyward, they use the term scud a lot. And I don't know really what it's supposed to mean, but they just think scud is such a flamboyant curse word. And then in the Way of Kings, it's Stormfather is like using it as an expletive, and
Right.
blustering and storming, and yeah, I do think it's a cool addition from Brandon Sanderson to put in these custom curse words. They're funny.
It's a clever world building tool, I think, because it's just a subtle reminder as you're reading that you're in a different world, that these are not people who are of our world, or a world even closely related to ours. It's a completely different one where they have completely different curse
Hmm.
words. Yeah, of course they do. But as you're reading it, it just kind of sticks out. At least it stands out to me and reminds me that I'm in a fantasy world. It's a cool tool. I like it.
It's the same. It's the same vein as Brightness Shallan or Brightness
Yes.
Devar.
Yep.
They that's a title that they use instead of Miss or Mrs., and it's referring to their eye color. So later they'll use the term Bright Lord for men, and Brightness for women. So it's a cool tool.
So something else really cool that I liked um, is we talked in the first episode a good bit about Spren, and we get a little more personality here, and a little more with the wind Spren. We also heard some new kinds of Spren.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
did.
remember specific names, but yeah, just any kind of Spren you could think of. Um, but we learned a little more about. I can't remember her name.
Uh,
Sil for short. I know
Silfrena.
that. Silfrena. Yes. I think that's such a pretty name, actually.
I think it's a
But
really good name. I am a big fan of the name
it,
Silfrena. Yep. She has a name, and she doesn't know why she has a name because
isn't that weird for a
yes,
to have a
Spren
name?
aren't even supposed to talk, let alone have personalities. So
Yeah, and she can also take forms of things. Was that a thing for all Windspren? Did
when
we talk about that? Can like Windspren kind of take shape of
yes, so when
guess what they
so
want?
certain types of Spren can change shape, although they don't usually do it in front of humans. So like you'll have a knowledge or a creation Spren. Let's talk about creation Spren for a second.
That was one I thought.
Shallan is sketching, and she pulls a creation spren, and it comes in the form of a pencil, and then she has another creation spren, and it comes in the form of a stool. So there are spren that come in different shapes and sizes. It's just they're not supposed to change on the fly like that.
I see. Creation Spren was one that I thought was really funny, if I'm being honest. Just because most of them are like emotion, like there's anger Spren or I don't know, and then that, and then nature. And I thought creation Spren was really funny, actually, kind of unique, just different from the others.
I was glad that we got a name for Caledon's Windspread because she's turning into quite the
Mm-hmm.
character, and we get more, I think, of her naivete with her, even the fact that she doesn't even understand. She knows her name.
Mm-hmm.
She knows she has a name, but she doesn't know why she has a name. It's like confusing to her that she has a name, and that just, I think, plays into even more of her innocence and just this. I get this feeling that she's discovering the world, as if for the first time,
Right.
almost. Like it's almost as if she's been created recently and is discovering, oh, I have a name. Like, wow, that's cool. It's a very interesting to watch her kind of develop alongside Caledon, and I think Caledon's getting a bit attached to her, even though he was annoyed by her at first.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Another thing I want to run back to is the bridge run, and I want to talk about the casualty rate for a second and how so many people died in this first bridge run, and Caledon was so shocked, and first of all he was exhausted when they got there, and so he wasn't thinking straight, and then he gets thrown into this bridge run, and a bunch of people die around him, and he's the casualty rate is insane. They lose 4 out of 20 bridges, which is what's the math there? 20%? Yeah, 20 they have 20% casualties. Any army that has 20% casualties in every battle is not going to last very long. However, Roshar is, as Brandon Sanderson said in an interview once, Roshar is extremely overpopulated. There are people everywhere, and you don't really get that vibe in these initial chapters because you're in the middle of nowhere. For like, the Shattered Plains is kind of the middle of nowhere, but there's still 100,000 people in the war camps that he walks up to. There's 10 war camps, and they're all filled with people. Roshar is extremely overpopulated, which makes sense based on the economy that we've heard so far. So there's high storms, which creates an abundance of fresh water no matter where you are. There is soul casting, which creates an abundance of food no matter where you are, so long as you have the right gemstone. So in theory, you can live wherever you want with as many people as you want, as long as you have the right gemstones. So there's an extreme surplus of people in Roshar, and the amount of slaves that they have access to at the Shattered Plains is enormous, and so they don't care about these lives they're throwing away.
It's a painful thing to realize as you realize that alongside Caledon, that the life of a bridgeman means nothing.
Yep.
But that background makes that make a lot more sense. And part of that too, I remember I want to say it was chapter 4, Caledon makes some kind of reference to farming the mountainside or something like that, which he describes as pure rock. It's just a rock mountainside, but he describes it as a lush farmland.
Right.
And that's just an interesting thought of, we would normally think of a rock hillside as lush farmland, but because of the water and the rock buds and plants that grow on it, it apparently is. So that fits with what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Something for the world building of Roshar is there's no soil. All soil has either been washed away thousands of years ago or blown away thousands of years ago. Everything is hard rock and like extremely like tough. So it's either built up creme and like packed sandstone or just raw granite rock. However, you can plant whatever you want because all of the plants are kind of surface plants. They kind of grow off the rock, like lichen and moss and that type of thing, and coral. And they get plenty of fresh water because there's high storms every 9 or 10 days.
It is an interesting environment. This whole time, with talking about where Caledon has traveled and the slave wagon and such, I always think of like a lush green forest there. They're traveling through really like foresty. I just envision trees everywhere and such. But yeah, it's probably way more flat than that, or way less lush.
There are trees, and they cut trees down for their wood, but it's not the trees that you're thinking of. They're kind of underwater trees, if you could imagine that.
Yeah, sea trees.
Yeah, sea trees.
Yeah, I had to rebuild my mental image a little bit too, because I was thinking of the same as you, Paul, trees and plants and things. And then as the more we learn, I realized that it is lush and green, and there's lots of things growing, but it's not the kinds of plants that we're used to seeing. It's this, underwatery type, seaweed and kelp kind of stuff everywhere.
I don't know if you can see on the cover of your book, Elliot, but there's rock buds behind this guy in the bottom right.
I noticed that. I did actually notice that, and that helps me a lot visualize what those are, because I was wondering what rock buds were, but I figured that was rock buds on the cover.
So the last thought I really had in the Caledon chapters was talking about the bridge run, and how Caledon was thrown in. Gaz put him in the front so he would die and such. But I thought one thing I really liked was Caledon ends up next to a man. Remember if it said his name or
It
not?
deliberately doesn't. It is the
Yeah.
leathery-faced man. That is what they call him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of envision an older, more experienced man. You know, he's at least done a bridge run before, and he kind of consoles a little bit with Caledon and gives him some advice. Tells him, counting your steps and things like that help it to be bearable and such. Because it seems absolutely just physically demanding and like very much like physically harming. But I thought that was really good because Caledon benefited a lot from that, and I like the addition of that kind of. He's not really an enigma. He's not a mysterious man, but just kind of just an act of kindness from someone. Almost.
It's a soft reminder that not everybody is a scumbag in this world. That he meets somebody who's just as low as Caledon is, and he hasn't quite given up all kindness and hope. He's still human. He's granted he dies on the bridge run, and but it's a general reminder that not everyone has given up hope. That like Caledon is beginning to. He's on the downward spiral, but other people are still hanging on.
And it reminded me back to last episode where we talked about Caledon taking that little boy soldier Sen kind of under his wing. Here's an instance of now the experienced bridgeman, not quite the same, but is in a way taking Caledon under his wing a little bit and showing the ropes. A bit of a, I don't know if payback or karma is the right way to say that, but just maybe a little bit of a reflection of how we saw Caledon before, and now Caledon's the one who needs the help.
Right. That's a good one. I wouldn't have made that connection. All right. I think we have successfully done these chapters. Any closing thoughts?
I'm beginning to get some answers to my questions, but I feel like the more we read, the more questions I'm gaining. So my question to answer ratio is still leaning towards the side of questions. Yep. I gotta know. I want to know. Gotta read more.
So unfortunately, we did find out that Noadon is not a knowledge spren. He is a person, and he has written something. Any revised predictions on who Noadon is?
We don't know that for sure. Maybe knowledge spren can write.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
It's not completely debunked yet.
But yes, my prediction is not looking very good right now. I think I will amend.
Used lots of knowledge spren,
Yeah, there you go. He's a scholar surrounded by lots of knowledge spren.
Okay. Paul's prediction of important guy that we are following is looking a little better, I would say.
Spot on
yeah.
So far.
Do you want to revise anything, or just hold it?
I'm sticking to my guns for now.
Important person. Okay. That will conclude it for this episode, and we hope you guys join us for the next one. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Elliot.
Until next time.
Peace.